Hey Dutchbags, what's going on? It's LandonRemixes here, and welcome to the 5th episode of Rapid Fire Reviews, the show where I give some quick thoughts about 5 different albums or EPs that I've been listening to recently. And this one was actually something I had planned on doing mid-summer but didn't get around to making until just now. So some of these are going to be pretty outdated, but I'm going to dive right into this. The first of the bunch is the debut album by the probably world's most famous sister DJ duo, NERVO, and I really had a lot of respect for them a couple years ago, back with when Vice Tone was still remixing them, and they were still making some fairly good music. I think they had a lot of talent and potential, especially as vocalists, and I think this album kind of destroys that talent that they could really have brought out on this record. But with singles like Hey Ricky with Krayshawn and the lead single Hot Mess from this, it just completely destroys the artistry that NERVO had on their old singles, and I think they could have really done something with this, and Ultra Records just kind of took that for advantage and made this a completely mainstream sounding record. Really didn't sound very good. I'm just going to try to get some opinions out real quick about this. I didn't really like the fact that all their freaking old singles appear once again on this record. The only song I actually did like, and that was pretty refreshing, was the drum and bass track with Nicky Romero called Let It Go. And it was really cool to hear Nicky Romero doing drum and bass when he's typically making progressive house, electro, stuff like that. But it was really awesome to hear both of them producing something different than they normally do. So that was the one thing I really liked about this album. Gonna give this one a 1.5, which is I think the second lowest rating I've given all year, next to Alaska Thunderfunk. The next thing I'm going to review is the debut EP by the Monster Cat artist WRLD, and he's actually a kind of good friend of mine. He sent me the EP a few weeks before it had come out so I could check it out and review it, but I didn't get around to reviewing it until just now. It came out a few weeks ago. This EP is actually fairly solid. The only really thing I have to pick with it is that although he does want this to center around some of the artists that he really likes, like Owl City and Passion Pit, I think the two songs, at least Chase It and Echo, respectively Passion Pit and Owl City, they kind of rip off the sound a little bit too much. And I don't want to say it does, because he does add his own unique blend to these tracks, but I think the similarities are a little too much. He actually told me he was trying to find a vocalist that sounded like Passion Pit for this track, so that just kind of it takes away a little bit of my opinion. But other than that, this is a really solid EP. I think it's probably the best WRLD could have done with his debut, and really takes a bunch of different styles. You get some indie dance and some new disco on this, and we get some of his signature sounds, and I think that was really cool. So you also get the track that featured on Monster Cat, Little Too Close, and that one was solid as well. Not the biggest fan of style. This EP, like I said, was pretty solid. I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. The next one's kind of a weird compilation album by Boys Noize called Strictly Raw Volume 1. And I was actually fairly interested to hear what this would sound like. I've been getting kind of into that weird housey style that Boys Noize makes. But a lot of this album is, you'll hear a lot of interesting sounds, and then you'll hear a lot of kind of just flat and not really too interesting styles. I actually wanted to do this one because I got a request to do it, and I figured I'd just touch base on it. Although I wasn't the biggest fan of the album, it was a fairly good listen, and there are a few, if you're a DJ especially, there are a few singles on this you should grab and use for your sets, because I don't think this is really a concept album in the slightest. It's kind of just a collection of songs. I'm going to give Strictly Raw Volume 1 a solid 5. The next one is the debut EP by Golden Features called 24, and for the most part my thoughts on this EP were about the same as Boys Noize. He takes a lot of different styles, combines them, or different concept of house music, and kind of blends them into this. The first two tracks are pretty solid. That's Baxter and No One. And then we get the final track, Do You, which actually isn't that bad either. It takes kind of this future bass house kind of sound that we've been hearing a lot lately. The song Telescope wasn't a huge fan of. Actually wasn't really a fan of at all, but the styles on this EP get a little repetitive. It was fairly solid though, definitely grab those couple tracks. I'm going to give this one a 6.5. The final thing I'm going to review in this rapid fire review is the album by Years and Years. I think they're an Australian kind of pop electronic band, and this album is called Communion. I really was into this album. For the most part, this was a really good listen. The only thing that really bugs me is that a couple of the sounds get really repetitive, especially the vocals. The vocalist sounds a little bit like a poppier version of The Weeknd, which I actually really liked, and sounds really good in this context. The single King, absolutely smashing. The song Worship. These are all really solid tracks, and this makes for a really good pop record. I typically don't get into that sound. I'm not into pop music, but this band happens to pull it off extremely well, and although I didn't really love the record, like I'm not going crazy over this, definitely not going to say it's one of my favorites from the year, it does make for a really solid listen, and you should definitely check this one out, if not for the lead singles, just for a good listen if you've got some spare time. So make sure to check this one out, especially. I'm going to give this one a solid 7. And what do you guys think about each of the albums I listed? Hopefully you're not too far off, and hopefully you don't really hate me for my opinions, because, like I said, it is just my opinion. Hope you guys enjoyed this 5th edition of Rapid Fire Reviews. I've got another one coming too with some older albums from a few weeks ago that I missed. So hopefully you guys also didn't mind having a few albums showcased and EPs that came out earlier. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. I will see you guys later. Peace.